In 1966, a young girl in Sicily was raped. 1,000 years of Sicilian custom dictated that the girl marry the man who raped her. The girl refused, sending shockwaves not only throughout Sicily, but throughout the world. My guest today, author Natalie Galli, read about the story of the Sicilian girl all the way on the other side of the world, here in San Francisco. And now, over 50 years later, Natalie has published a book about her quest to see if she could find the girl who said no, which also happens to be the title of the book. I'll talk with Natalie about why the story stayed with her for so many years, why she decided to track down the woman at the center of it, and what she discovered and experienced on her quest in Italy. So don't go anywhere. Matthew Felix on Air starts now. Happy Mother's Day. Welcome to Matthew Felix on Air, people who create, people who make a difference, coming to you once again from home base, San Francisco, California. Many of you probably know that I am recently back from a month in Paris, France. I got back a little over a week ago, and it was an incredible, very busy month with 3 podcasts, 3 literary events, bearing firsthand testimony to the Notre Dame tragedy, and lots more going on behind the scenes. I also got to see 2 wonderful, very worthwhile exhibitions while I was in Paris. One was at the Atelier des Lumières, and if you're going to Paris anytime soon, you really want to check this out. I had read about it in the UK Guardian before I went to Paris, and then a few friends went and said, yeah, no, it really is worthwhile. And basically what it is the Atelier is a former 19th century foundry that they have turned into this immersive art space. And when I say immersive, what I mean is they take an artist's work. So it was Klimt, I think, is who they started with last year. And now it's Van Gogh through the end of the year. So they take an artist's work and they use 140 video projectors, 50 speakers, and walls up to 10 meters or 30 feet high to project their art. So you are literally immersed in their artwork. And meanwhile, of course, there's music playing, and it's everything's moving around. The pictures, the paintings, essentially come to life. So if you're heading to Paris, that was really, really worthwhile, and I highly recommend it. I loved it. The only thing I would say, though, is when a friend went to get tickets, they said that they were sold out for the entire next month. So it is one of those things that if you're going to do it, you might want to check into tickets ahead of time. I was also privileged to get to attend the opening of a new Hittite exhibition at the Louvre, and that exhibition is called Forgotten Kingdoms. So if you're interested in ancient civilizations, it is also really worthwhile. It has some incredible artifacts, including some really large sculptures that were excavated from sites on the border with Turkey and Syria. And they were actually excavated through 1911 to 1913, but then they got damaged during the Second World War, and they've since been put back together, basically rehabilitated so that they can be exhibited again. And I actually, really like ancient history, and having lived in Turkey and love that part of the world, I found it really interesting and very worthwhile. So again, that is the Forgotten Kingdoms exhibition at the Louvre, and that is now through August 12th. I would have been happy to stay longer in Paris, but at the same time, it is great to be home, and it's a lot easier to do my podcast here in the studio than it was in my rental in Paris, although I did pull it off. But it took so much post-production over there. And so anyway, I'm really glad to be back here doing it here again. But it was worth it to do it over there. I had 3 great conversations, one with author David Downey, one with author and filmmaker Aaron Byrne, and then the third with artist and creative process exhibition founder Mia Funk. I couldn't upload the full video versions of those episodes while I was overseas because my internet connection was too slow, and I went to a couple other places trying to find a better internet connection, was not able to. However, since I've been home this past week, I was able to upload the video versions of each of those episodes. So if you prefer to watch versus just listen to the show as a podcast, you can now check out all 3 of those shows on Facebook and YouTube. Okay, after this quick message from my host and sponsor, WordSpace Studios, I will be back with author Natalie Galli. A quick thanks to WordSpace Studios in San Francisco for sponsoring Matthew Felix on Air. WordSpace's mission is to bring together writers and thinkers of all ages and experiences. Wordspace will soon be offering creative writing workshops, a literary book club, and guided writing groups. And Workspace is already offering writing residencies. They are submission-based, and they provide writers with room and board for up to 1 month. To find out more, you can email info@wordspacesstudios.com. Okay, so I have to cheat here because because I lost one of my cameras is missing. So I'm going to do this before I introduce Natalie, and then I'm going to put this camera on Natalie. So we're having this is a little technical. Okay, here we go. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold this in my hand, and then I'm going to turn it on Natalie once I'm done with with this introduction. Okay. Natalie Galli has penned 2 illustrated children's books, Ciao Meow, an Italian cat story, and Spin, The Hound Lost and Found, a tale of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Her writing has been anthologized in Italy, a love story, and in 4 volumes of Traveler's Tales books, 3 of which were awarded gold and silver prizes by the Bay Area travel writers. Natalie has worked as an editor and proofreader for Burning Books, as a columnist for the Berkeley Monthly, and as a freelance contributor to the San Francisco Chronicle. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you.
All right, let me put this camera down and see. Let's see, and then I'm going to have to adjust it once we go back to you. I lost the camera somehow. I'm not sure how that happened, and it could be in France. The camera could be somewhere in France. It could be, I don't know where it is. I ran home, tried to find it. It should be here in the studio. But thank you for your patience as although I guess it's really, you can't tell the difference. I'm the one who sees how messed up things here are. All right. So I just mentioned, first of all, again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I just mentioned that in addition to the book that we're going to talk about, The Girl Who Said No, that you've written 2 children's books. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me a little bit about them?
Yes. They are self-published, and they are the product of the artwork of my sisters and my text. So they're definitely a cottage family industry production. That studio is called Sunbath Studios. Okay. And I'll just hold
it up.
Most recent one up. I think I'm holding it in a place where it can be seen.
You are. Yep, that's
this
perfect.
was just published early this year, and we're very excited about it. It essentially tells the story of one of my grandmother's survival of the San Francisco quake through the voice of a dog.
Yeah.
And beautiful illustrations by my sister.
Okay, that's great that you're keeping it all in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's the most recent one. And the previous one, though, was about an Italian cat.
Yes.
And what was that? What was the storyline for that?
Ciao Meow.
Ciao Meow.
Ciao Meow, an Italian cat story.
Yeah. And what's that storyline there?
That story is a cat who is abandoned, left behind when the litter is picked up and taken off in a cart, and the cat Sabina needs to find a new home. So it's a story of how an owner who doesn't know she needs this cat and the cat that doesn't know she needs this particular owner come together.
And that takes place in Italy.
It takes place in a small town in southern Italy.
In Sicily or elsewhere in southern?
No, in Calabria, actually. Okay. The inspiration was my sister's partner's childhood home.
Oh, okay.
And his early experiences with animals.
Okay.
Who were some of his best friends.
In Italy.
In Italy, in a town called Verbicaro.
Okay.
Many, many immigrants from...
So you've got lots of Italian. It's not even...
I do.
Even in your extended... Your family marries into more Italian, it sounds like.
Some
or
of my family did. Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because the new book obviously takes place in Sicily, which we're going to talk about. The cat book takes place down down south in Italy.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about your. It sounds like you're this sort of multi-generational Bay Area Italian family. So can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yes.
The Italian part.
Sure. Well, it's Italian on all sides.
Okay.
On my father's side, it is northern Switzerland and Lucca.
Okay.
And Lucca is the place that my grandmother, who survived the San Francisco quake, where her parents came from.
Okay.
My southern roots are on my mother's side. They are 100% Sicilian. Palermo and a small town called Contessa Entellina, which is in the Greek Albanian plain. Mm-hmm. So that already gives you an idea of the blending of cultures.
Yeah. And north and south in Italy are not known for getting along so well. So how did that work out in your family?
Yeah.
Or maybe it all balanced out and it's just perfect. You're all just really, really well balanced.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that part. I'm feeling pretty balanced today.
Okay, good.
So that's
good, because I'm not.
Okay.
So that's good. You can carry this for us.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll carry it. North and South are two totally different realities in Italy. Many people don't realize how much the regions of Italy dictated culture, language, dialect, food, everything. And so actually in my case, my parents met because they were both of a particular political persuasion, which was not typical at the time. There were other progressive socialists in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But most Italians were Catholic and not necessarily politically inclined that way.
Yeah.
So that was actually the draw between my parents, was that they both came from these pedigrees of socialist, progressive thinking on the part of both of their sets of parents.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, San Francisco is a good place for that.
Yeah, it was a good place for it. And they were both of my parents were born here, and one of the grandmothers was born here.
Yeah.
So yes, it's third generation.
Okay.
On one side.
Did you guys have a North Beach connection? Because that's the
Yes.
That's what we most of us here associate with the Italian neighborhood historically.
That's right. Definitely a North Beach connection. My mother's father, the Sicilian from Contessa Entellina, from the Greek-Albanian plain, became a medical doctor in Palermo, went through New Orleans, stayed there for several years working on the yellow fever epidemics, plural, that passed through there, and decided on San Francisco. So his office was on Columbus and Green, and the building is still there.
The building's still there.
Yes,
Right.
and there were other connections with North Beach, but there were also connections, very strong ones, to Cow Hollow and the marina, and that's where I grew up.
Okay.
Actually.
All right.
So we stayed fairly close to home. But it's amazing what that one hill between Cow Hollow and North Beach can do to separate people. It's amazing.
Insofar as within the Italian community?
Well,
sort of
in
two
my
different...
family, it actually was a kind of a
divide.
Yes, of some sort.
Oh, no, they're North Beachers and we're Cow Hollowers?
It was more that, a little bit. A little bit. I don't know if I can say more on the spot, but I will just say that each of those neighborhoods had very different feelings to them and very different. It's more of a sensation, and they're only a mile away. At each end. I mean, from one end to the other.
We forget how small San Francisco is.
Yeah.
So and plus both of those are kind of in the north, obviously part of the city.
That's
so
right.
The distance it's just the hill as the crow flies.
It's just the hill, yeah.
So what about while you were growing up, and then we're going to talk specifically about Sicily, but what about, did you speak Italian at home? Was that day in, day out, it sounds like your Italian heritage was probably very much a part of your day-to-day existence? I mean, or...
Yes, it was very much a part of my day-to-day existence, but I was not encouraged, as so many kids of my generation and at that level in the immigration were discouraged from spending too much time learning the original language. So
isn't that just heartbreaking?
Well, it is.
But typical, but very, very
typical.
Because you want to integrate with the community, or your parents, I mean, or their parents wanted, we're Americans now, and you want to embrace that identity, which I can understand if you're coming from someplace else. Yeah. But now today, having learned, 2 1/4 languages myself, it's like, no. If I had kids and I were someplace else, I would just want them to hold on to that language, because that's such gifts, and you learn so much easier when you're a kid and all that kind of stuff.
You do. Of course, you're right. I mean, it's the dilemma that so many people face, and so many people feel the loss of not having had that language when they get older. Yep. In my case, I heard lots of Italian. I heard very few words of Sicilian, but occasionally a few would slip out in a heated moment. Yeah. But I had the ear attuned to the language, and I loved it, but we weren't necessarily speaking it ourselves.
Well, and it's I always say it's like 3 different muscles. Because, so for example, I can understand usually I can understand Italian, although it depends where in Italy.
Yeah.
Because there are, I guess, certain dialects I can understand much more easily than others, or certain accents. I'm not sure which. I wouldn't know how to tell you. But understanding is sort of one muscle. Hearing, orally understanding one is one muscle. Writing is another. And then verbally being able to produce, because, of course, it's much easier to write because you can take the time and you can watch what you're doing. But then when you're speaking in the moment, you've got to be on your toes. And so to me, they're almost like three different activities that have the same base. But it's fascinating that you can understand a language without being able to speak or write it. The brain can somehow do that.
It is.
Just from being around it.
Right.
Anyway, that's a whole other...
Well, it is, but it's an interesting thing. And I think that those must be three different distinct parts of the brain.
Yeah.
Because some happen very easily and effortlessly, and some are torture.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's so much work.
Yeah, so much work.
Okay, so let's talk about Sicily specifically. This is the place where the book takes place. This is a big part of your past, like we just got done talking about, although we could talk so much more about that, I'm sure, as well. But what can you tell us at a high level about the history of Sicily? Now, it's so complex, it's so layered, so I don't expect... I am going to cheat. I'm gonna help you with some of your own words here.
Okay.
Because you've got a great summary in the book. But just at a high level,
yeah,
for someone who's not familiar with Sicily, how would you kind of characterize it?
Okay, well, let me just at first say that Sicily is in the very center of the Mediterranean, and it is it has therefore been a magnet and a goal from every possible cardinal point and sub-cardinal point around the compass of the Mediterranean and beyond.
Yep.
But it has a tremendously ancient, fascinating, complex history. It's very bloody.
Yeah.
I mean, terribly bloody and sad and difficult on the population at so many junctures. But it makes our melting pot here look like a little dish like this, because it's 5,000 years of this invasion, this trading group. It's such an amalgam, and it shows in the architecture in the most beautiful ways that you can never see that kind of architecture anywhere else. Literally two kinds of styles blended into one.
Like Arabo-Norman.
Arabo-Norman,
right.
which is a genuine architectural style, and that is the cathedral in Palermo, which is both Moorish looking, Moorish, and Norman. The Normans came and they left, they brought many things, and part of that is embedded literally in that architecture.
Right. So I'm going to cheat here, and I probably should have had you read this, but I didn't figure this part out. And also, I'm going to read this so fast, and you're going to read your parts, a couple of excerpts later, much more beautifully than what I'm going to do. This is really just for function.
Okay.
But I liked how you summarized kind of what you just said here in these 2 pages early on in the book. So, quote, "They came to the island from every direction, drawn into her turquoise waters. The indigenous Sicans were overlaid by Sicils." I'm not going to say half these names right. Sicils, then Elmians, then Phoenicians, Greeks, and Romans. Vandals and Ostrogoths poured in. Arabs created a great cultural flowering of tolerance, enlightenment, and philosophy for a brief time. Normans brought their red hair, French customs, and established universities. This nonstop procession of traders, warriors, explorers, artists, colonizers, and pirates, soldiers and poets, learned and lowbrow, mathematicians, architects, tilers, musicians, royalty, and refugee, from every port rimming the sea, steered in with the currents. The Spanish were mean. They did their best to subjugate and destroy, much like they did in the New World. The Austrian Habsburgs played some kind of role. The British built villas and cultivated Marsala wines. I read somewhere that Napoleon once tried to conquer the island but didn't pull it off, and I was ignorant of the details, but when Garibaldi and the Northerners came down and claimed the island for the newly founded Republic of Italy, the unification, it was more of a land grab, one more assault. So I just thought that was such a great, sort of listing with glimpses into each element that the respective cultures contributed to Sicilian culture and history and architecture, and it really is. There's a lot going on there. Like you said, our melting pot in comparison pales in comparison.
It's a little
it's a petri dish in comparison.
It's a petri dish.
Yeah. Okay, so along those lines, I want to read just a few other facts about Sicily that I got on Wikipedia because it is so interesting, and I'm always curious when I have someone on the show to talk about a particular place, I like to just get some facts. And so the first fact I'll mention here is that Sicily is the largest island in the Mediterranean. Mount Etna on Sicily is the tallest active volcano in Europe and one of the most active in the world, and it currently measures 10,922 feet high. Sicily, quote, is a melting pot of a variety of different cultures and ethnicities. I just covered this, but including the Italic people, the Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Normans, Swabians, Aragonese, Lombards, Spaniards, French, and Albanians. So it's interesting. There are a whole bunch there that we didn't even mention in those 2 pages.
I know, I left some out. I know.
Which only underscores the point,
Yeah.
right? About 5 million people live in Sicily, making it the 4th most populated region of Italy. Sicily is the Italian region with the highest number of expatriates. As of 2017, so 2 years ago now, 750 Sicilians, 14.4% of the island's population lived abroad. For lack of employment, every year many Sicilians, especially young graduates, still leave the island to seek jobs abroad. Today, an estimated 10 million people of Sicilian origin live around the world. And so I just said I think that there were 5 million on the island today, right? So a lot of Sicilians everywhere. The last thing I'll mention here is Sicily continues to have a GDP per capita below the Italian average and higher unemployment than the rest of Italy. Difference is mostly caused by the negative influence of the mafia that is still active in some areas, though it is much weaker in the past. Let's just talk really quickly about the mafia, because it was interesting in your book. Not too much. We're not going to incriminate you. We're not gonna.
And I'm not going to incriminate
and
anyone.
And you're not going to incriminate anyone.
Yeah.
We're not going to worry about when we walk outside after the show. But that is one of the big associations that we have with Sicily, right? Is the mafia. And I spent 3 weeks in Sicily several years ago, 5-6 years ago. And you see in Palermo, a lot of the palaces or palazzo are, they're just decrepit in this. You can see this faded glory. And a lot of what I was told when I was there, or read about, maybe a little bit of both, was that a lot of the money that's destined to help a lot of the cultural stuff and get Sicily back on its feet is because the mafia still does play a role. And there is a part in your book where there's a factory that was never used, for example, right?
Yeah.
But then there's a tour guide in your book who tells the tour that the mafia really is nothing.
Right.
So just any thoughts, high level, on kind of that association that we still have? And I don't know, maybe I just kind of covered it, but.
Well, you may have covered it. I do cringe when I realize that there is an entire genre of film, mostly out of Hollywood, but other places too, that thinks that Sicily equals mafia. On the other hand, kind of like the class system in England, everyone is affected by the mafia who lives in Sicily.
Yeah.
But we are, when we look at our own culture here, we're affected by what goes on in Washington. All of us are, to some degree or another. So that's kind of the comparison I want to draw. And that I do think it's lamentable that the association with the mafia precludes some people from learning anything more about the amazing island, because it's the only impression they have.
Right.
And just one final thing I'd like to say, which is mafia is a really kind of romantic term for terrorism. And terrorism, as we know, sadly exists everywhere.
Right.
So I just wanted to make that word choice, that word association.
Yeah.
Not that it isn't accurate, or not that it didn't generate from Sicily, but
right. There's more. There's more nuance, more complexity.
Yeah.
Okay. So much more we could say about Sicily, and the last thing I guess I'll say about Sicily is it is wonderful and completely worth a visit. And I was going to talk about some of the tourist stuff, but we've already talked so much about Sicily, we kind of need to move on. So let's talk about The Girl Who Said No. Can you give us a high-level introduction to what the book is about? And then I know you're going to read the prologue, which also helps kind of go a little deeper to setting that up.
Yes, I can. I have my book in front of me, and the prologue is not even on page 1, it's page 11. It precedes chapter 1. What I want to say about it is that whether I would have noticed this article if I didn't have Sicilian heritage is hard to say, because it certainly galvanized me. So let me just read the prologue, which is 1 page long.
Sure.
I could so easily have missed the tiny item in the San Francisco Chronicle, but sometime during the spring of 1966, on the hunt for a current events article to bring to 6th period social studies, I came upon the 3-inch filler. Raped Sicilian girl refuses to marry. Trapani, Italy. A young woman has shocked her countrymen by refusing to marry a man who raped her. Franca Viola, 18 years old, has defied more than 1,000 years of Sicilian tradition by rejecting nuptials with Filippo Melodia, 25 years old, who tried to force her into marriage by the time-honored custom of abduction and rape. Convention dictates that Viola must accept a, quote, reparation marriage with Melodia to restore her broken honor. The tradition is still part of Italian law, which provides that all charges be dropped when a woman weds the man who has kidnapped and carnally violated her. The girl has publicly avowed that she has no intention of changing her mind, despite the forceful opinions of many of her townspeople. She has not left her family's modest white home for several weeks. They have endured repeated vandalism and threats of violence. I did not cut it out. We had to bring something front page to class, but I never forgot the Sicilian woman's story.
So what does a sixth grader think when she reads something like that? That there's a woman obviously somewhat older than you were at the time, but still a young woman, an old girl, a young woman. Somewhere in between, right? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I just want to say that I was not in sixth grade. It was sixth period. But it was ninth grade.
Ninth grade.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you were actually closer to her in age then.
I was. Yeah. I was about 5 years younger.
Okay. So what did you think when you read that? Wait, she got raped and yet she's supposed to marry this guy.
Right. Well, my first thought was, this is absolutely insane.
Right.
I don't understand this.
Right.
I can't make sense of this twisted, bizarre tradition. It is so wrong in every possible way. It defied belief. It was cognitive dissonance for me to read it, and that's why it gripped me so much. As far as what I was going through in junior high at that point, I think I was trying to figure out women's liberation of 1968, 1969. This was a couple of years before, and those were critical years. I was trying to figure out, how do I grow up and be a woman when I have no real pathway to get there? And this is one girl, older than me, but she was called girl in some cases, who, well, at the very least, she knows when her society is wrong. Right. She knows that it's wrong. Her gut told her, her intuition, everything about her told her that this was wrong. Yeah. And she was not going to be a part of it.
Right.
So that resonated for me because I was questioning everything and didn't necessarily have words for what I was going through or what the limitations were that I felt I was feeling as an adolescent girl. But I was feeling it. Yeah. I was really feeling it. And so this kind of, this is like, this just galvanized me. Yeah.
And it galvanized you so much that 50 years later, you were still thinking about it.
50 years later is about now.
Right.
And
so 40 plus years. Yeah. I don't know how long it took you to write the book.
Well,
but yeah.
That's another story. Do you want me to tell you?
No.
Okay.
Not that part yet. No, because I already have so many questions.
Okay. But go ahead.
No. So let's say 40 years. 40 years later, you're still thinking about it.
Well, to be honest, it was 22 years after that.
That you started writing the book.
The next phase of the book, the action that I took happened. The events of the book take place in 1988.
Okay.
When I went there specifically to look for her. Yeah.
So let's talk really quickly before we get into some of the specifics about your trip and your quest to see if you could even find her, if she was even still in Sicily, which you didn't even know whether she would be or not, because so much time had passed. But so bride napping as a custom in Sicily. Let's talk about this because we just said it's 1,000-year variations on this are 1,000-year custom. I guess the 1,000-year custom was that if a woman gets raped, she has to marry the guy. I don't know if that's part of bride napping. I don't know if they're exactly one and the same, but they're related, obviously. You say in the book, you ask your cousin how long that custom has been around, and she said centuries, well, millennia, back to the ancient Greeks. They had a term for it, kleptogamos, literally meaning stolen wedding. We can look to the Romans as well, and certainly the Arabs. What about the Old Testament? Well, it was interesting for me because I first heard about this a year ago, this custom in Central Asia. And so it's not just something, and maybe this just speaks to what we were just talking about a second ago with regards to all the different cultures that were passing through Sicily. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. Maybe just similar things happen in similar cultures. But Wikipedia explains, so again, I went to Wikipedia just to see how widespread is this. It's not just Sicily. Bride kidnapping, also known as bride napping, marriage by abduction, or marriage by capture, is a practice in which the man abducts the woman he wishes to marry. Bride kidnapping has been practiced around the world and throughout history. It continues to occur in countries in Central Asia, which, like I said, that's where I found out about it, the Caucasus region, parts of Africa, and among peoples as diverse as the Hmong in Southeast Asia, the Tzeltal in Mexico, and the Romani, we used to call them the Gypsies, in Europe. In most nations, bride kidnapping is considered a sex crime rather than a valid form of marriage. Thank God.
Yeah.
Some types of it may be seen as falling along the continuum between forced marriage and arranged marriage. The term is sometimes used to include not only abductions but also elopements. So, and there's a whole bunch more there. But I just thought it was interesting. It's not even just a Sicilian thing.
Yes.
It's more widespread than that. So let's go then. How and when did you decide? Okay, so you said 22 years after you read that story is the when. But what was it or how and when did you decide, not when with regards to time-wise, because like I said, we just established that, but what was it that made you make that decision? I want to see if I can go find her and find out what happened to her after this. Because you didn't know anything, but she was still up there and you were still curious.
Yeah, she was still up here, and she had been on and off. I mean, I didn't think about her every day of my life of those 22 years.
Good.
But the story lingered with me, and the question, because it was a filler, such a tiny little article, which many people don't know what a filler is. But in the old days, when column inches in newspapers maybe didn't go all the way down to the bottom of the page, and there was a little gap left. The editors had a pile, I think, of selection of human interest kind of stories that they could plug in to fill up the empty space, literally, in a paper.
Yep.
And this was one of those. So of course, I had no idea what had resulted from her saying no. I had, my worst fantasies were that she had been killed for her audacity to stand up to it, or run out of the town, or run out of Sicily, or maybe had to make an escape. I even remembered, and this is kind of interesting to me, I remembered that she was pregnant from it, which turned out not to be the case. I mean, my adolescent mind was remembering a lot that was accurate, but that was inaccurate. But that was the anxiety. That was one of the anxieties, right? I mean, that did not, in fact, take place.
Right.
But at that point, when I suddenly became re-obsessed with Franca Viola's story, I just had to find out. It was just one of these things that came over me.
Not a rational thing. It was just more this.
Yeah, it was as if it had been, germinating in me all that time, a really slow growing seed, or it was dormant, and suddenly it sprang in front of me, and it happened to be International Women's Day, which may just be a coincidence, but it may not.
Yeah.
I was laid off of a job in Berkeley. I suddenly had some freedom. I had a little bit of money, and rent was cheap back then, and I could actually take time off and just go. It was this
perfect storm, sort of.
Yes, in the best possible way. Plus, my mother's first cousin, Maya, who accompanies me on so many of my adventures. Yeah. When I get to Sicily, a dear, dear woman, said to me, "But you must come for the Easter celebrations. They are fantastic. They last for all week before Easter. And you will see them nowhere else." I mean, again, like the architecture of Sicily, you will see this nowhere else.
Right.
And so blending all of those things together, plus the fact that I did try to find out in San Francisco and the East Bay at various libraries if I could find a thesis that someone had written about this girl, or if I could look through microfilm and find it, but that proved to be extremely painful.
Yeah.
And even the San Francisco Chronicle would not let me into their vault.
Oh, they wouldn't even let you try.
They would not let me. I mean, they don't let anyone in, I guess, or they certainly didn't back then.
Yeah.
And even though I had a friend who was a reporter for for the Chronicle. He couldn't get anywhere with it. They couldn't find it. He wasn't allowed to go in. It suddenly, I could get no information. I had to go myself.
Yeah.
And find out.
Okay. So you decide you're going to go. It's all, and all the signs are pointing you. Now's the time. It's Easter. You laid off. You can do this. And you go, and you're staying with your cousin Maya, your mom's cousin Maya,
My mom's
who is
first
also
cousin.
your cousin, I guess,
Yes.
once removed or whatever that is. Yep.
Yes.
And so you get there, and again, you don't know if the Franca, the woman who said, the girl who said no, you don't even know if she's still in Sicily, if she's alive, you don't know anything about her because you couldn't find out anything. But you tell your cousin Maya, you bring up the subject with her, and what is her reaction? And this is the second excerpt that. If you could read.
I will.
This is very telling.
Yes, and this is a little bit longer. It's from chapter 4, the night that I arrived in Sicily. Maya picked me up at the airport. She drove us back in her insane style.
As they do there.
As they do, and she was right up there with all of them in terms of no lines in the road, no sense of linearity at all. Just
no
get
rules,
there.
just get there.
No rules, just get there. So I'm recovering from that. Plus, there are no seatbelts in the car.
Oh, yeah, because back then, why bother? Yeah, and they could also drink and drive. Didn't matter back then.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure
Maybe you
that's
didn't
true.
know that.
She didn't do that. But,
okay, good. I'm glad she didn't.
No, she didn't. But we parked. We've gone into her apartment. I'm remembering how beautiful it is because I have been there before, many years before.
Yep.
And we're at the dinner table. So Maya stood to clear the dishes, and I jumped up to help. No, you're the guest. Sit. Relax. She returned with a bowl of oranges. We shaved thin pieces off a wedge of pecorino cheese on a platter between us. Maya, si cara, do you happen to remember someone by the name of Franca Viola? Franca Viola! She sat upright, looking straight, piercingly at me. Of course I remember her. Whatever became of her? That I do not know. She put her knife down. Why do you ask such a thing? I've always been curious about her story. Do you think she's still alive? Oh, surely she is still alive. If she were not, we would have heard about it. Do you suppose she stayed in Trapani all this time? Trapani? That's not where she lived. That's not where the kidnap occurred. It was in Alcamo. This I remember absolutely. Ah, and how far to Alcamo from Palermo? Just an hour from here, if that. Traveling from the airport in the opposite direction. So you think she still lives in Sicily then? My cousin grew wide-eyed. Probably. The conversation, which had been moving along so well, with me feeling kind of confident in the language, halted. We don't talk about these things anymore, she finally added. It happened a long time ago, and it was very sad and hard on the poor girl. People don't like to bring it up. No? I would like to find out where she is. Maya sat rigid, puzzled. Perché? Because she was so strong, so courageous, so strong. But how? There is no means to find this woman, Natalie, she said urgently, her neck muscles straining. No? I straightened my spine. With her fruit knife, Maya took an orange and peeled it, rotating it slowly so the skin fell away in a helix toward her plate. I don't see how you can do it. I was thinking I could go to her town, to Alcamo, and ask around. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Her knife was poised, suspended in one hand, the peel of the orange boing-boinging from the other. I have to take a sip.
Take a sip.
Okay.
That's what it's there for.
I can't make this sound that she made.
Take a sip. That's what the water's there for. Okay, while you're taking a sip, we'll say hello to Diane LeBeau.
Yes.
Hello, Liz. Hello, Matthew. Hello, Susan. Susan, I think, is she's my friend who is, I believe she has Sicilian parentage as well. But anyway, go ahead with your...
Okay, so the sound that I needed,
so make the
water.
sound now that you have the water for it. Yep.
Okay, here's the sound.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
She clicked her tongue and wagged her finger. It's not done. And I might add that means no.
No, okay.
In Italian.
In Italian.
In Sicilian.
In Sicilian, yeah.
Okay. So I busied myself trying to make an orange peel helix like hers, red juice splattered all over the plate. It could be dangerous, she continued. Even though it happened over 22 years ago, I broke the fruit into segments. A blood orange, it tasted like raspberry perfume. Maya was shaking her head in thought. I'll tell you one thing. Her story was front page news for a year. I remember very clearly those daily headlines about Viola. Oh, yes. Were most people on her side? In the North, absolutely. But Sicilians were deeply divided on the subject. Some felt that she was completely out of line. They called her the most terrible names out in the street. Ugly things. Puttana, strega, diavola, whore, witch, she-devil. Can you imagine? Though many, many Sicilians did support her. Did you? She twisted a button on her blouse. I did, of course.
She-devil. That's my favorite.
I know.
She-devil. Is there anything more insulting? Right. Okay, so your cousin is saying we don't talk about those things anymore.
Yeah.
There's no means to find this woman, Natalie. I wouldn't go to her town and ask around if I were you. It could be dangerous. So did you think twice about undertaking the search when you heard all that?
I absorbed it. I also had jet lag, and
So it didn't sink in as much as it might have otherwise?
I didn't know really what she meant. Mm-hmm. I thought, here's an old lady. I'll be very honest with you. This is some time ago. Yeah. An old lady who has old lady worries. My family is full of old ladies who worry. And, I remember this. I'm recognizing this family trait. Yeah. But she also didn't specify why it was dangerous. Mm-hmm. So if she had, I might have taken an extra breath or worried a little bit more. But because she didn't, and it's very telling that she didn't say why she was so worried. Yeah. I sort of plowed ahead in my American style.
Yeah. Okay, so so much of the book is about your actual search, and so we're not going to talk about that because people need to read the book to find out about the search itself and whether you do even end up finding the woman or not. We're not going to talk about that again. Sorry, but that's why you have to read the book. But one thing you definitely did find is you were, unlike the San Francisco Chronicle here, you were able to get into some library archives and find out more about the actual trial itself. Yes. So a couple of questions about the trial. Well, first off, is there anything that really struck you about the trial? Because this is, again, 1966 was the trial?
Yes.
I think? Okay.
End of 1966.
Yeah. So just some high-level reactions to what you discovered about the trial. Was it basically what you would kind of expect? Was it...
Because I was, I got access to the microfilm in the National Library in Palermo, which led me to daily recounts of what went on during the trial. And there was so much attention focused on it, and so many people were so glued to the information that I was astounded by how beautifully the Italian journalists were able to report what was the essence of what was said in some of the testimony, and that's a tribute to the Italian journalistic style, which is very, very detailed, and nothing like what we're accustomed to right now with our news and our attention span, of
sound bites.
Yeah. These are tweets and. Just the most superficial of things. These were in-depth reports of what went on each day in the court. And by the way, we haven't revealed who was on trial. Actually, you and I haven't revealed who was on trial. And that was also something that astonished me as well, that she might actually need to go to trial. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. She might and she might not.
I know. I'm just biting my tongue here and trying to revisit everything I just read and make sure I don't say the wrong thing.
No, you did.
Okay. Because we talked about this beforehand. She's like, no spoilers. I said, no, I get it. No spoilers.
No, we haven't spoiled anything.
We haven't spoiled anything. Yeah.
The drama of what went on in the courtyard and the drama of the testimony is the kind of stuff that you could almost point for point turn it into a screenplay if you wanted to, because it was so it was almost like Rashomon, you know. I mean, it was like Rashomon. Everyone had a different version of what the key people had different versions of what happened, of course, and that's often the case in any trial.
Oh, inevitably, almost,
yes,
yeah.
But the figures, the main figures who appeared, and the way that the judges dealt with the material, and the way that the prosecutors and the defense attorneys dealt with the material, it's so colorful. And I'm not wanting to diminish the potency of it or the seriousness of the charge or any of that, because it was very, very serious. But it had a quality of kind of almost larger than life.
So when you were reading about the trial, though, did that give you any insight into how this young woman found the strength and courage? Because one of the reasons victims oftentimes don't come forward to in any regard, whether it's in court or just in public, is because of what, the ramifications. They could be called liars, they could be ridiculed, they could be shamed, on and on and on and on and on. So when you were reading about the trial, which again, we're not going to get into specifics, but did it give you any insight into how this young woman found the strength and courage to stand up to this 1,000-year-old tradition? Or maybe not necessarily, because this is all kind of legalese, but did it give you any insight? Just...
It did. I wouldn't call it legalese. It wasn't.
That you just got done saying they were actually writing really beautifully and detailed, I guess. So maybe.
Well, there was legalese as well, but maybe not the way that we're unfortunately accustomed to being, kind of repelled by it, because it's so technical.
Yeah.
Yes, I did get insight into what propelled her through this hell that she was thrust into, and that was a tremendous strength of character and a family that supported her, specifically her father, about whom the newspaper, some of the journalists made a big deal, because his position was kind of the key to why she was even alive, in a way, after saying no and going to the police, because he stood by her father, Bernardo Viola.
Right. I thought that was really interesting, that she's going up against this bizarre sort of horrific angle of patriarchy, basically, to oversimplify. And yet one of the pillars enabling her to do that was her father. So I thought that sort of spoke to, sometimes when we're going up against the system, we do need people that are part of or empowered in that system to kind of help us shake things up.
Absolutely.
Right? Because her father, like you just said, was critical to her being able to go forward with this and say, no, I'm not marrying this guy.
Absolutely. I suspect she would have gone to the police anyway. In fact, there was one, I don't suspect it. There was one brief interview with her right after she came home from the 10-day abduction, in which she said that if my father does not bring charges against you, I will.
That's
which
right.
is astonishing. And of course, this was reported by the papers. I mean, which in and of itself is fascinating.
Right.
I mean, in many other circumstances, this drama, this wrenching drama that a young woman, a girl, was thrust into would normally have been kept under very tight wraps. But because there were articles about it, because the press was showing interest in this story, it had bigger implications and bigger effects.
Well, see, and that's another angle to this that was interesting to me, is in oppression, whatever the form of oppression, in this case, oppression to women having to go through something as ridiculous as this, but something that allows that to happen, first off, and something that you specifically comment a lot about in the book, is the complicity of other women in this case. Or it could be other workers who aren't speaking out against bad conditions, the oppressed worker, or gays who aren't speaking, whatever it is. The oppressed, oftentimes part of what facilitates that oppression is the fear, and then the people who don't speak up, don't rock the boat. And so you talk about a lot in this book, or at least a few times, about how your cousin Maya and her sister didn't want to discuss Franca's story, as we talked about a second ago. But again, once you're on, you've decided you're going to try to find her. You don't know if you're going to be able to, how things are going to pan out. But they at least now know that you're trying. And even then, they still don't want to talk about it. And so I'm going to read, and then there's something else that comes out related to your family, which again, we're not going to give a spoiler, but in response to this thing related to your family, the following quote comes from the book. And I just want to read this because I think it really speaks to this sort of complicity and silence and how people are complicit through silence. So Amelia, who this is another like second cousin or something, I think.
Yeah.
I had,
I
had to remember the exact relationships to everybody. Okay, so Amelia says, quote, "Do you see, Natalie, I want you to understand something about this island. This is the way Sicilian women are taught to behave. They live their lives keeping the dark truth to themselves, never telling even their own daughters what has happened in the family. They carry around a shame that they die with." And then your cousin Maya, at a different point, much earlier on, says, quote, "We are Sicilians, you see, and Sicilians respect silence because we must. Our lives depend on silence. Nobody will want to stir up the past." And that, of course, was when you were talking about, I think, taking this search. So what are your kind of thoughts on that? Because like I said, that comes up a few times, and you had just said this, if it's interesting that the papers even covered it and did away with that silence, which is what made it such a big deal in the end. So just thoughts on silence and how how it relates to Sicilian culture and then this particular case.
I'll start with my grandmother, born in Palermo, who was a very quiet woman. She held a lot in, and I didn't understand why she was quite so reserved and so stoic. But she wasn't at all the caricature of a fiery Southern Italian woman.
Yeah.
You know, she was the opposite of that. So that's probably where it started. I mean, I was always trying to figure out the silences in my family. I mean, you can't be Italian and have, the opera gene, the screaming and
right.
I mean, the singing and the chorus and the full orchestra backing your every passionate thought.
Right. Talking with your hands.
Talking with your hands.
Right.
That combined with the silence of Sicilians that I first learned from my grandmother made for a very, I was very puzzled by it. Of course, we've spoken about the mafia and about the what is called omertà, which is the the code of silence, which has to do with not snitching to the authorities, because again, back to the idea of Sicily being invaded and conquered and colonized, and allegiances and alliances switched every decade practically. I mean, it's just such an unreal history of kings and dukes and this person and that person taking control. The need to learn how to not talk to authorities, that's where it comes from. I think it has a very ancient history.
And it is tied to survival, it sounds like.
And it's tied to survival. Yeah. And then you throw the mafia in, where if you speak or even indicate something, that you're not supposed to do, that may be the end of you.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's horrid.
Right.
I mean, that's what fascinates, I think. I mean, I'm going to give Hollywood a little bit of a break about this, because that is a fascinating state that dramatically, many different movies can work with. But to live it, and what people have gone through on the island when they've tried to defy the mafia or stand up to it, this is just plain tragic.
Yeah.
So I think I answered that.
Well, I asked you about 5 questions at once.
Oh, okay.
So I think you did well.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I don't remember which of the questions you actually answered.
Silence.
About silence. No. Yeah.
Silence,
but I asked like from 10 different angles. So yeah, you definitely answered.
Okay.
But let's go back just and sort of wrap up the trial, my questions about the trial, with one of the most important questions, which is, and one of the reasons that, that you decided to write the book, is the ramifications, not just for Franca's life or Sicily, but even beyond Sicily and throughout Europe. And I mean, again, you found out about it all the way here. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the ramifications of the trial itself.
Well, essentially, Franca's original no, I will not marry the man who is a criminal who violated me. No, I will not do it. Essentially, ultimately changed the law, and more importantly, ended the tradition. I mean, the tradition, as far as I know, does not exist in Sicily now. Now, it's possible that in some very remote areas, I don't know. I can't speak to that. I do not know. But her case jumped right to the front. of the consciousness of Sicilians in that era, in the mid 60s.
Yeah.
And it stayed there.
Yeah.
And I think we can also, just to look at what was going on in our own country at the time. And I don't mean to disregard the many, many people who were working with Rosa Parks, because there were so many people who were working with her for so many years to achieve the right to vote and the civil rights struggle that was going on here. But Rosa Parks is a figurehead, and rightly so. There are these figures that come along who represent an enormous transformation of society by their acts. And in the case of these two women, Franca Viola and Rosa Parks, their acts are in some ways very simple.
Yeah.
In some ways, they're very complicated.
Right.
But the result was a change in culture, which is amazing. And I had no idea when I went.
1,000 years.
1,000 years, and really maybe more like 2,000.
Yeah, even more.
Maybe even 3.
Right.
It's
not a small change.
Not a small change.
Yeah.
And one girl to do it. I mean, did the Sicilians need an almost mythical figure, which in some ways she was, though she was completely her own person, and in no way, wishing to be in the public eye. This is not what she wanted. But I think because of the long tradition of myth and tales and legends, and again the old culture that rises up from the bottom. It's just part of the soil of Sicily. I think that she spoke on a kind of a mythic level, or her actions did, I should say, and with mythic results. Yeah.
Along those lines, I mean, one of the things that is just so glaringly obvious to me, at least, that we haven't called out yet is, but in the spirit of, changing culture and Rosa Parks, and it's just how timely this book is. With Me Too and Time's Up, and, the Chicago Tribune reported yesterday about how we have states. This just seems very close to what's going on in this book. States enacting laws to prevent abortion after 6 weeks, which is oftentimes the woman doesn't even know they're pregnant yet. That even in cases of rape or incest, the abortions wouldn't be able to, which means that we could have, again, very similar to what's going on in this book, 11-year-olds giving birth to children that are the result of rape, which is just so close. I mean, like you said, thankfully she didn't get pregnant. Franca in your book didn't get pregnant. But, and this has happened in Argentina. This was in the same Chicago Tribune article. They talked about earlier this year in Argentina, a country with strong prohibitions against abortion, a 12-year-old girl and an 11-year-old girl, both impregnated by men in their 60s, were denied abortions and ultimately underwent cesarean deliveries 24 and 23 weeks, respectively. Both babies died. Tragic. And so, but I raise this not to obviously get into talk about the pros and cons of abortion or where we stand on that or all that, but the timeliness of your book. And just what are some of your thoughts on that? Because again, it would be so easy to look at this story and say, look at how far we've come. That was in 1966, and Franca did change culture, Sicilian culture, and now they don't do the bride kidnapping or whatever the term was, and yet we still have certain similarities that continue and persist or transform, different variations on these themes. So I'm just curious also if related to all that, and once again I'm asking you 5 questions at once, if you're releasing this book in this era of Me Too, and was coincidental or just like timing just worked out that way, nice synchronicity, or if you were sort of cognizant of that. So anything and everything you'd like to talk about, those huge issues and questions, go for it. Yeah.
Well, it is heartbreaking to read these items or hear these reports in current events. It's shocking in a way.
Yeah, it's shocking.
It's horrifying, and we seem to be in a very regressive state right now. Perhaps internationally in some ways. About Franca though, and about my writing the book, it is essentially a coincidence. But maybe there aren't any coincidences.
Right,
I don't know. I mean,
right.
Maybe the interest in the book is partially because we have been talking about some very painful things in this country in the last couple of years, Me Too,
Mm-hmm.
and so on, which must be talked about.
Right.
You know, they absolutely must. And it is not a movement that is in any way over anytime soon. I mean, I wish I could anytime soon, meaning that if there are stories to come, they must come.
Yeah.
And we must listen.
Yeah.
We all must listen. We have to put aside, some of our preconceived ideas of what girls and women really are, and just listen to these heartbreaking stories that require support. These situations require support, not censure.
Yeah.
When I had a thought, but it kind of vanished. Let's see.
So coincidence with Me Too, with the laws related
Yeah.
to women's rights.
Well, I wish
rights.
exactly. I wish I were writing a historic piece that was, we could go, okay, good. That doesn't exist.
Right. We're done with that.
We're done with that.
Yeah.
Well, we're done with that in Sicily, but unfortunately, we're not done with it in other places.
Yep.
So this story reverberates out to other cultures, other places, other people. But in terms of writing the book took me a long time to write.
Yeah.
And so I really wasn't done
Yeah.
until very recently.
Yeah.
It took many, many years, and I thought I was done many, many times.
That sounds familiar.
Does it?
Yeah. Any
Yeah.
writers out there? Can you relate to that? I thought I was done, and then I realized I needed to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then my editor said I wasn't. Then my
Yeah.
beta reader said I wasn't. Then my
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lonely road for the writer, and that, or at least it was for me. But
I think it is for a lot of us. Yeah.
For a lot of us.
Yeah.
But it did not let me go. I originally, when I came home from my trip to Sicily, I thought, well, I'll write about it for the Chronicle. That would make a kind of a full circle, nice little thing. And I
Sure.
knew someone who might help me get it published at the Chronicle.
Yeah.
And one needs that. One needs those connections that
It's all about who you know.
It is.
Yeah.
And I, in fact, did write an article for the Chronicle about it, but things were percolating in me. And not only was Franco's story so dramatic, powerful, and moving, but I had Sicily to write about. I had the island itself, and the culture, and my family, and the food, and the crazy humorous, crazy, sad things that happen there.
Well, that was my next question. So
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, so we've been going for an hour, so we're sort of running out of time. But that was my next question is, so the story revolves around your quest to find out what happened to Franca, but then it's also about the personal side of things. You're going home, one of where your ancestors are from, and you have been there before. You're sort of going back to Sicily and rediscovering or discovering parts of yourself and your own heritage. And there are some funny stories, that have anecdotes that happen to you along the way. I'm just curious, do you have any, I mean, that could almost be a whole other talk probably, but any thoughts about some of as it's represented in this book, your experiences and what you took in addition to the Franca part of the trip, but what you got out of returning to Sicily personally?
Yes. Sicily, what I learned, and in fact, if I really analyzed what my cousin was saying that first night, the portion that I read from chapter 4 earlier, what if I really break it down, she was saying, hold your shirt on, hold your horses, all in good time.
Yeah.
We have some Easter celebrations to go see, and you're
Yeah.
not going to want to miss them.
Yeah.
And nobody will be able to answer your questions anyway. Just hang on. And in Sicily, though that nobody says this in the book, it is to me so true. Nothing happens in a straight line, or very little happens in a linear
That's the Mediterranean.
fashion.
Yep.
That's the Mediterranean.
Yep.
That's the cultural behavior.
Yeah.
Things go in curves. Things bend around and return to where they were. There were many, many points at which I thought I was never going to get anywhere researching the story or getting any answers about Franca. There were many, many people who told me she will never talk to you. Give up. She just doesn't talk to anybody. Why would she talk to you?
Right.
You can hardly speak the language. I mean, I'm being a little hard on myself. I spoke relatively well, but I'm not fluent, and I needed those.
And you didn't speak the dialect, it sounds like.
I don't speak the dialect, no, because that I was forbidden from learning.
Oh, you were forbidden from learning.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My mother was forbidden from learning it, but of course she did anyway.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, I almost needed one of those siestas every afternoon to recover.
Your brain was
my
just...
My brain was just, it was exhausting.
No, I get it.
To try to communicate in Italian. Nonetheless, I did what I did. But the Sicilian, I just have to say, my Sicilian is a completely different language. It's an exquisite ancient language, and it deserves it. And there's so much literature written in Sicilian.
Oh, is there?
Yes, yes. It is a very literary language, and I'm so glad I knew a little bit of it, because it's beautiful, it's spicy, it's lively, it's musical, beyond Italian being musical, which I think it is. But definitely. Sicilian has its own kind of...
Does it have a lot of Arabic influence?
Yes, it does.
Is it like Maltese? Have you ever heard Maltese?
I've never heard
It's fascinating.
Maltese.
Yeah.
I've never been to Malta.
Yeah, I bet it's similar in that respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of U's at the end, so... this is one thing this is the one phrase that my mother taught me in Sicilian, and I love to repeat it, and it occurs in the book too. Here it goes.
Okay. Here we go.
Era beddu, u pitrusinu, vinuatu, e ci pisciao.
Interesting.
The parsley was beautiful.
Oh, that's right.
Until the cat peed on it.
So you learned the essential.
I did.
The essential dialect.
I did.
This phrase that you needed to know.
I did. Yeah.
But that's interesting how, you hear the U's.
Yeah.
So like in Catalan, one thing, and now we're really getting off track here, but this is fascinating.
Yeah.
In Catalan, what I love is, so Catalan, for those who don't already know, are up in the northeast, around Barcelona, basically, it's Catalunya. And also Mallorca, and some in Sardinia, they have some Catalan still. Anyway, it's always eu. So it's Mar de Déu and Tanqueu la Porta, and it's all this eu, and it just has a really nice sound, and it sounds like it's kind of a variation on the U's in.
That sounds really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's I love the sound of it. Okay. What about I'm just trying to figure out where to go here, because I was going to ask you, and I don't know, maybe your experience as a woman on Sicily, because I like this, because so much of it is about this other woman's experience as a woman, as a Sicilian woman. Yeah. And I know that you talk about in the book, which we won't get into too many specifics, but you talk about in the book before you go some of your own trepidation, because you are going to be traveling at points by yourself, and you carry a fake wedding ring to kind of ward off potential unwanted suitors. So any thoughts on kind of what you learned when you were by yourself in particular as a woman in Sicily?
Well, first of all, this was 31 years ago, so things surely have changed.
God willing.
And that's something I can't verify because I haven't been back yet in all this time.
Okay.
But
I need you to go back for part 2.
I need to go back at some point. But my travels, one of the reasons my cousin Maya was so protective of me was not about the mafia. It was about the men. She was far too discreet to talk directly about it. But I mean, as soon as I was on my own and traveling with even with a tour group, I was confronted with some situations that were annoying, infuriating, mad, you just want to stamp your feet, but you can't.
Right.
I was treated with, and again, this could be historic, and I hope it is.
Yeah.
But I was not treated very well being a single male traveling alone, because single women aren't supposed to be out in the world. It's a kind of a variation of Franca's situation was an extreme. Yeah. And what girls went through before the era that I'm talking about was far more restrictive, horrifyingly so. Horrifying. Yeah. But for me, even then, there were vestiges of those old attitudes. Of course, I get them here too. I mean, we all do, and that's why I've included some of those anecdotes, because I think many people, women in particular, but people can relate to just the hassling of being an obvious foreigner and getting into kind of hot water without realizing it and having to improvise a way out.
That resonates in my experiences.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Not as a woman, obviously, but being the obvious foreigner and just being, the target, then having to try to get out of that. But it was interesting because in one situation, a woman puts you in your place. A woman is the one who basically makes you feel like you shouldn't be out on your own again. So there's that whole complicity that sometimes comes up, that angle on things. Yeah. But one thing I wanted to, as we sort of wrap up here, at the same time, I just like this juxtaposition, and I liked that you wove this in occasionally into the story. At the same time as we're talking about some of the challenges that women have traditionally faced in Sicily, hopefully less so today, there's also this tradition that goes way, way, way back of these strong mythological, and you work them into the book periodically, right? Do you want to just talk about a couple of those and their relevance to the story and to Sicily? And
I would love to. Yeah. The traditional island flag, the Trinacria, is the three-legged triskelion, or it has other names, but it's the head of Medusa in the center, with three running legs sticking out of her head. Right. She has snakes for hair. There are different versions of this, but she has the Medusa snakes for hair. She has ears that are winged, and I'm leaving something out. Oh, there are sheaves of wheat stuck into this very complex, amazing symbol. And the first, it's the most beautiful. It's brilliant, and it's ancient. It goes back to Homer's time, I believe, probably. Yeah. And it's also actually in the Isle of Man. Actually, it's up there as well. Okay. The island symbol. Yeah. But it's a stunning rendering of the woman at the center. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the symbol of this island.
And that's the symbol of the island. Yeah. And there are a few more goddesses and mythological figures who figure very hugely. And I'm
going to ask you about a couple, but I want to read one quote. Well, first of all, I want to say, I forgot to say at the beginning of the show, if anyone has questions, this is very last minute, so you might not have been thinking about questions, but if anyone has questions, we are drawing to the end. Now would be the time to let us know. But I want to read one quote that you have about the Trinacria. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's how you say it.
Because I just thought this was beautiful, and again, I thought it's a great example of how you weave this into the story. So, quote, "Undoing the clasp of my necklace," because you're wearing the pendant the whole time, "I studied the Trinacria medallion, which struck me as an ancient sort of compass or treasure hunt map. This talented dame could sprint, fly, or slither, and somehow, mysteriously, she was going to direct me in my search." So I love that even though we're talking about all the challenges that women are facing, you as a traveler, especially obviously Franca and what she went through, all the same, it's this strong, badass, she's got wings for ears and snakes for hair, woman who's the symbol of the island. But tell me a little bit about Aphrodite and Persephone, just kind of quickly, because those are two other ones that were really important here, it sounds like, as well.
Yes, thank you. I think one of the reasons that the Franca dilemma, the dilemma that Franca faced was news, was because it reminded people unconsciously of Persephone. Yeah. Persephone, the young goddess, the girl, the daughter of Demeter, or Demeter, some people say, who was abducted as she was picking flowers in a field with her friends.
So unfair.
Yeah, so unfair. Abducted by who? Hades, the god of the underworld. And he rode up in his chariot, he broke through the ground and grabbed her and drove with her down, screaming down back into the bowels of the earth, into the underworld. Yep. And I feel that Franca, in some ways, at least unconsciously and all the more powerfully for that reason, was reminiscent. Her acts were reminiscent of that very powerful, very popular myth that many of us, it's the favorite of many of us.
But the entire myth minus the part, isn't she the one who had to eat the pomegranate seeds?
Well, she did eat the pomegranate seeds.
Yeah, that's the only part that maybe Franca didn't necessarily, and maybe Franca did do it, we don't know. But the parallels are crazy specific.
They're crazy specific. Yeah. I think in some ways she did eat the pomegranate seeds for 1 year. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or maybe for more. I can't speak for her. Yeah. But she did have to undergo a trial. Yeah. And that was a kind of a return to hell.
Yes, for sure.
It definitely was for her.
Right.
And also, I'll just say that, in subsequent times, she said that the attention of the media was devastating for her. She didn't want it. This is not what she asked for.
Right.
I mean, I suppose someone could say that about Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Am I remembering her name correctly?
That sounds more or less right. Yeah,
okay,
it's been a while.
I think it's Christine. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out for some. But you know when we see women being put through hell in front of a committee in Congress or something, or in front of a judge and jury trial, we're seeing someone who should be supported and is being put through the ringer. So in that sense, I think that she did eat at least one pomegranate seed. Not that she was starving. She had been fasting the couple of nights before she was abducted. So she was really hungry. And I'm talking about Franca, and this is the myth fortunately takes on it has a different ending than her story. But she did undergo many years of being the subject of attention that she did not want to be. In that sense, she was in hell.
Right, for sure. Okay, in wrapping up here, I want to move quickly from mythology to just a quick question about mysticism. So I had Erin Byrne on a few weeks ago, and we talked about her book Wings. And in Wings, and the title even refers to, at least in part, to some interactions Erin had with a statue in Paris, in the Louvre, Winged Victory. Well, here I am reading. So I just had her on 2 shows ago, and here I am reading your book, and you go to a museum, and you have statues talking to you. So I don't know, is this a thing now that's happening? Or what did that interaction mean to you? Do you just want to quickly touch on that? Because I thought it was funny. 2 of the past 3 books I've read have had the writers, the travelers talking to statues. So I didn't know if this is happening all over now, or if I should be concerned, or if I should go find some statues to talk to myself.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that exchange that you had? Yeah.
Perhaps that's an option for you.
Okay.
If a statue speaks to you
I'm
in whatever
keep my ears
form,
open.
Maybe interact with it.
Okay.
For me, it's the power of art, of beautiful art, beautiful sculpture, the two statues and the head that talked to me, the head of the philosopher.
Yeah.
These are magnificent bronzes from that are in the museum in Reggio di Calabria, which is across the Strait of Messina from Sicily. So it's actually at the very tip of the toe of Italy. But they spoke to me because I needed guidance. And I also had banged my head in an unfortunate incident. And I was a little woozy and a little out of it.
And a little open.
Open.
Because you have to, they can speak, but if you're not open, you're not going to hear them speaking, right?
Yeah. I think art is speaking all the time to us. I think that's why art is there. And, usually we probably have our ears.
Our rational mind rational mind shutting down the ears to what it has to say.
Yeah. And those statues really helped me. They were life-saving for me.
I love that.
Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you. So I think statues have always been speaking.
Yeah. It's just we gotta pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so in wrapping up, there's only one thing that's missing from this book, and you actually touched on it earlier.
I did.
What was just in passing.
Yeah.
Recipes. And the only reason I say that is because you're constantly talking, and this is one of the things that we love about books that take place in countries with great culinary traditions, right? She's constantly talking about this amazing meal, and then this amazing meal, and then this amazing street thing she gets, and this amazing restaurant, and it's all the ingredients that I love, garlic and mint and all these Mediterranean herbs. And so I would just like to suggest that in the next edition of this book, you put some recipes.
Oh, actual recipes.
Or a companion, actual recipes.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I think
what a great suggestion.
Or a companion book, recipes from The Girl Who Said No.
Yeah.
And we'll talk with Larry about that. Make that
we
happen.
will. And that's Larry Habiger.
That's Larry Habiger, Traveler's Tales, publisher of this book. Awesome all-around guy.
Yes.
Former guest on Matthew Felix On Air. But I was thinking that afterwards. I was thinking that would be great because my mouth was just watering the whole time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Except for one. There was one girl. Oh, spleen. You didn't eat it either.
I didn't eat it either.
Yeah.
But it's a delicacy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very beloved. It's a huge cow spleen that's cooked on a spit.
Where was I? They were just talking about eating brains. I mean, we eat everything.
Well.
Right? And then they call it a delicacy.
Yeah.
You never ate it.
I did not.
Okay.
I did not.
Okay. But you're not vegetarian. That was just too
No,
much.
Yeah. No, that was too much for me at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We need to wrap things up. This was
Okay.
a great talk.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
loved
you.
the book. I'm getting the book from my mom for Mother's Day.
Oh,
I talked to her
wow.
before the show today, and I hadn't gotten her anything yet because they're actually traveling, so I couldn't send her anything. And I was telling her about our talk, and she said, "Oh, that sounds like a book I would like." I said, "I'm sending you that for Mother's Day. Perfect. Win-win. I don't have to feel like a horrible son, and you get a book that sounds interesting." So yes, I really enjoyed the book. I highly recommend the book, so check it out. Again, The Girl Who Said No by Natalie Galli. And I also just want to say travelerstales.com, because your website is not up yet, although it will be soon.
In construction, but happening rapidly.
So for now, travelerstale.com. And then I also wanted to mention you have one upcoming event that we want to make sure people know about who are local.
Yes. I will be speaking at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco on Tuesday, May 21st at noon. And I will be signing books afterwards.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So if you're local, check that out, Commonwealth Club. That's on the Embarcadero now, right?
Yes.
I mean, I say now. I think they moved there years ago. They used to be on Market Street, I think, for a long time. Yeah, it's a new. I think it's their own building.
Yeah.
They're doing well for themselves.
It's near the ferry building, so
it
easy
is.
to get to.
So if you don't live
water.
in the city, you can still cross the bay easily and come. That again is at noon on May 21st at the Commonwealth Club.
That's right.
Natalie, thank you much for being here today.
Thank you, Matthew.
This was great.
It's been wonderful.
All right, that's all for today. I can't switch to my normal camera because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm missing a camera. We're going to have to get to the bottom of that. So I'm just going to do it to that camera right now, and Natalie's going to be with me as I close out. And I just say thanks again to Natalie for being here. Thanks also to WordSpace Studios for being here. They, again, or for hosting me, rather, for letting me be here, letting us be here. They, again, are at wordspacesstudios.com. Thank you for watching and listening. If you liked the show, would you please share on social media and subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen or watch? I would really appreciate it, and it really helps. For more about me, my website is MatthewFelix.com, and links to my social media, books, other podcasts, and all the rest can be found there. If you have any comments, ideas for the show, or just want to say hello, I would love to hear from you at FelixOnAir at MatthewFelix.com. Thanks again for watching and listening, and have a great week.